Jamie, thanks for coming down, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you asked me how I've been, and yeah, I can say I've been good. I honestly mean that. I have I don't know how spiritual you are, or if you dive into that realm with recovery, but I would say, I've stayed sober since I last saw you, and even before that. So I just recently celebrated a year, which is amazing because that's my second time now doing that.
Congratulations.
And it was hard. It was hard to get back there. I found it harder to come back into recovery this time than it was to originally come to when I first came in at 23. I was forced to go to rehab back then.
Right.
I was introduced to recovery at the treatment center that I was at. I was introduced to spirituality a little bit later. But my point with all of that is I have like a different connection, I would say, with a power greater than myself that I choose to call God. And on the days when I'm not doing recovery stuff, recovery's hard, right? Yeah. And it's especially hard when you're not doing recovery things with other people, such as recovery meetings or whatever your thing is, your therapy. What do I do the 96% of my life outside of that, right? And so I was taught to connect with a power greater than myself because my will got me here. And when I live on self, bad things happen, So to answer your question, I've been good. I've been diving into the spirituality a lot more, listening to more spiritual recovery tapes of people framing it. And that's what I love that about recovery is that you come in here and and nothing wrong with Christianity or Catholicism. Like that's all good stuff. It works for a lot of people, but everything is suggestions in recovery, right? You come in and people are like, hey man, you can do this stuff or you can go and drink, or you can half-ass it. I recommend that you don't do that. And I don't know about you, but I've done that. I've done the half-assing thing, the kind of middle of the road solution.
Yeah.
But no one's going to force you to do anything here. No one's going to tell you to believe in God. No one's going to, these are all suggestions and recommendations. So it's a beautiful thing.
I really appreciate hearing that you've been doing well, first of all, since it's been a while since I last spoke with you, but, and hearing about spirituality, I recently just had 1 year of sobriety myself. Yeah. And that's like the first time ever that I've been able to do that, in my adult life. And so the way I was able to have some consistency was by taking a lot of suggestions from other people, having humility, because everything that I had tried in order to stop didn't work. It was ineffective. And that failure of that the shame and the guilt about, the promises that you make that you're going to stop, and how the impacts that it has on your family. And it feeds into itself in a negative way. And it just sort of keeps, it makes it difficult to come back from when you aren't successful. Yeah. So I get that as well. I can't imagine after 1 year how difficult that must have been, but that's a testament to your strength, I think. And good for you that you're able to do that. That's not something that many people, from my experience,
are coming back.
Yeah. So that's beautiful.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, shame. You mentioned shame there, and it's true. There's levels to shame, I think, for me at least, right? Where it's I've built up all this recovery, and so I had another and it's not harder or easier for any. It's all subjective, right? Coming back, anyone's experience in recovery it's all perception. It's all, you can't say that guy had it harder than that guy, or vice versa.
Right.
On paper it might look like that, and don't get me wrong, some people do have very difficult situations, but at the end of the day it's how you perceive it. I know a lot of people that went through homelessness and were doing okay for a while, and it's just and then some people, homelessness brought them to their knees and they took their life, or whatever outcome they ended up doing. So it added another level of shame of all these people knew that I had 7 years of sobriety, and I had to admit to them that I had relapsed. And to your point, it's as soon as I go out in the world with me and my brain, it's you piece of shit, you fucked up. Those were the thoughts in the beginning.
Yeah.
And it gets better, it gets better with time. And I love what you said is I had to turn my brain off some in the beginning, at least. That's even today, where it's I want to go this way, but that guy said he went that way and it worked for him.
Right.
What do I have to lose?
Yeah. Towards the end the beginning rather of 2025, I started my recovery journey of, going to recovery spaces and meeting people that had achieved that long-term sobriety, which was a goal of mine. So I really tried to connect with as many of those people in recovery.
Yeah, you were texting every single day. I think you still do it. That's the one thing I loved. I love that about you, right? Is when we first met, you said to me too. You're like, "Hey, I'm going to text you every single day," and I didn't believe you at first. I was like, "Yeah, whatever, man." Like, dude, every single day you would text me and just check in.
Yeah.
And you, to my knowledge, you were doing that with other people.
Oh
right?
yeah.
Connection,
Yes.
the opposite of addiction, connection,
Yeah.
right? Making new friends, asking for phone numbers. It's so hard to do sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So how did you do that? How did you get through that?
I got comfortable being uncomfortable, like I got goosebumps right now just thinking about that. But it was vulnerable to just open myself up to asking people who were complete strangers for their number, contact information, and then, having that commitment to contact them, follow up with them, and be consistent in that. But I needed a new plan, a new path, right? Like I would wake up with an obsession of like what I was, going to do to take my, like what poor coping method I was going to choose. And I would be successful in that endeavor, in that pursuit. And so in order to, create a new map in my brain, I needed a new plan and a new path and new habits and new rituals and routines. And part of that was like from the start of the day, doing something different. And so I would text people. My list started off small because it was, maybe 10, 15 people, but it grew over time. Yeah. I think at one point it was up to around 200.
Wow.
Yeah.
Connection.
Yeah.
I needed to connect first thing in the day.
That's it.
Power greater than myself. Group of people.
That's it.
Right? Mm-hmm. Simple. You're not necessarily getting on your knees every day and praying. Not saying that you don't do that, but that's the thing I tried to drive home with so many people is like that in of itself is a power greater than me.
Yes.
A collective of people that I can just tap into whenever I want.
Right.
And I'm sure some of those text messages turned into coffees and conversations and phone calls. And so it's a beautiful thing. The thing too is it's like old pattern. When you say that to me, it's like old pattern. Uncomfortability, unmanageability, fear, discomfort comes up in your mind in whatever circumstance you're in. What's your first reaction, right? For me, it was, I'm going to get some Coke. I'm going to get some meth. I'm going to take a pill. I'm going to take a drink, whatever, gone,
right.
At least for the short term, right?
Yeah.
And now it's coming into recovery and rewiring that pathway. Hey, I'm going to choose healthy behavior, such as texting someone, calling someone, going for a walk, being comfortable in the uncomfortable.
Yeah. And at first, it was just seeds. You're planting seeds because I didn't really see any sort of, the rewards.
Gratification.
Yeah. There wasn't instant gratification, right?
Tough,
and that was something that my brain had been sort of addicted to in itself, like was not waiting, not patient, like immediate answer, immediate response, immediate connection, immediate soothing, right? And so to start to have patience, and to trust in a process, and making incremental change, like, 0.001% better today than I was yesterday, and seeing that by putting positive, energy into my interactions, into my intent, that reflected back to me in other people as well, and in circumstance, and my mind started to become more positive seeking, and seek out positive exchanges, and detach from negative interactions or behaviors, and whether that be personally or socially, like avoiding sort of like gossip type energy, or anything that, was outside of myself and not focused on my own personal recovery. Yeah. I went from not being comfortable alone and having to, disconnect from that feeling of loneliness, to seeking sometimes solitude as a way of recharging, and growing in my spiritual path, I found that as time went on in my recovery, that my spirituality and that part of it was really instrumental in terms of like regulating my nervous system, finding stillness, and connecting with my higher power, which I choose to call God as well.
That's beautiful. Amazing. So let's get into a little bit. Why don't you first tell me what do you hope people, whenever you share your story or your experience, what do you hope one person or people get out of it?
A feeling that they're seen, heard, not alone, that perhaps hope, like just that I'm able to have some positive interaction and exchange and help them in some way to heal. I don't know what that means in what will be significant to which person. Like in talking to some people that, you know, in recovery that have had a positive outcome in their life after talking with me, it was something that I didn't consider to be significant, but for them it was huge. And so I can't have this idea that this is what will be the way of changing someone's life. It's just living my life authentically and being honest in my connection, because that itself allows people to feel heard and to hold space for them so that they can extract from life what life is there to give them.
Yeah. I love that. It was well said, man. It's, I don't know what's going to flick the light on in somebody's brain. Right. And
That's
to your
it.
point, yeah, it's like every time I've ever shared, people have come to me, man, you said that one thing about this. And I was like, I kind of just like said that in passing. I didn't
Right.
even think that that was a big part of my story or my journey, but good, you know? And yeah, it's when I share honestly, yeah, I was told early in recovery that the best share is an honest share, right? Not, I need to wow these people with these crazy stories. And, you know, sure, that's entertaining and shock value. But if I'm going to share something of depth and weight or receive a message of depth and weight, it's honesty, it's authenticity, like you said, where it's like, holy fuck, I used to feel like that too. Yeah. Wow. I didn't know anyone else did that or felt like that. So well said, man. Beautiful. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what your last 30 days of drinking and drugging looked like?
Oh, pain, isolation, anxiety, hopelessness. I didn't trust myself with my own personal safety at a point. My last 30 days was a lot of escaping from social settings and just my biggest like drugs and alcohol would be my higher power, would be my God. Like that was what would take me away from the shame or the pain that I felt of past traumas or emotional pains, you know, even sometimes physical pains, like, because I found that my immune system wasn't responding very well because I was really low energy a lot of times. And when I would be binge drinking, that I found weakened me as well. So the past 30 days was like a lot of poor coping, really, trying to escape feelings of emotional wounds and feeling hopeless about that. Like it was when I went to a place for psychiatric healing, that's when I started to have a calmness coming over me. I had retreated from everything that was really a part of my life and of importance, like my family, my work, my education, all of these things I just sort of withdrew from and went into sort of this hermit mode. I didn't have a large group of people that I would even use with. I usually would do that in isolation. I wasn't one for gatherings and would try to keep that pretty private and hidden in my life. But I don't think it was hidden that well, to be quite honest with you. From my perspective, I was thinking that withdrawal was preserving people from like the worst of me, but it was actually harming those closest to me because I was withdrawing from them and not being able to be present for them. And I didn't see that at the time. So the last 30 days was probably some of the most desperate days of my life, of fear and shame and loneliness.
Yeah, I can relate to a lot of that. You mentioned you're a father too, right? So that adds another layer again of shame and guilt and remorse. What was sort of the moment that brought you to your knees where you waved the white flag? What was that moment like? And you sought help?
That moment was, I was using in a place where I felt unsafe. And I was just really distrustful of the environment. And I feared for my life and was having a lot of anxious moments. My body wasn't reacting I kept losing control of my body, to be quite honest with you, like spasming, like my arm was stiffening up, and I thought maybe I was going to have cardiac arrest. And so I ended up getting into an Uber and getting myself into an environment where I could be medically supervised through withdrawal. And at that point, I was kept under observation for a couple of days, and then I was transported to a detox facility where I was, where I stayed for 20 days. And it was that place there in that detox that changed my life in a really profound way.
What were the sort of things that started happening? Like, what did you start noticing? Because for me, when I think of that too, is like, I think a lot of recovery is timing, right? And a lot of people don't like to hear that because I want my son to get sober now, or my loved one, my husband, he's at rock bottom. Why can't he stop? Or I was with a new guy the other day.
Right.
And, sorry, it's such a beautiful thing, man. Like I had a moment. It's just a sidetrack here for a bit, because I hadn't really reflected on this with anybody yet.
Yeah.
I was having one of those days where I was like in my head a couple days ago, and God works for me, does things that I can't do for myself. This guy popped into my head, and I had been talking to him before, but I thought of him, and I sent him a message, and he responded, and he's not doing well, right?
Okay.
And I offered, like, this isn't me, right? These ideas that come up in my head, these service-based ideas, it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing of recovery. I'm in my head all day. Poor me. My life's not good, going the way I want it to. I'm not making enough money, right? These things are ruminating in my mind. What does, recovery tell me to do? What was I taught to do? Reach out and help the next person, help the new guy. So this idea pops in my head. I call this guy, and we go to a recovery event space. And I just remember like having this moment of everything he's saying to me about how his life is spinning out right now is exactly the way that my life was, right? And I don't have the power to get anyone sober. All I can do, to your point earlier, is share my story, right? And so I share my story, and he's like, man, I did that too. Like, how did you get out of it? How did you do this? And I tell him what I did. And then I go home at the end of the night, and suddenly I hadn't thought about myself for the last 3 hours.
Yeah.
Right? But I was overwhelmed with emotion when it happened. And what I do now is I just kind of like, when that happens, I get gratitude cries, and sort of what I just did now a little bit. I just kind of look up and I'm like, thank you. Right. Like, this is the answer.
It is,
service, being of service. Because when I came in, somebody else. So when you say that, something clicked for you, I'm reminded of my early days I've been to a few rehabs, but every rehab, there's a different point where it's like hope was just, that's what I call it really, is like hope was popping up in the form of people, in the form of counselors, in the form of me feeling hopeful, whatever. And so what was that moment like where, for me, it was like just seeing people that had been happy and sober in a rehab, right?
Mhm.
It's like those things were just blew my mind. It's like this young guy here when I was 23, especially. Here's all these young people here that aren't using and drinking. They're pretty cool. They're cool. Like I would hang out with them outside of here,
Right.
and they're not using drugs and alcohol.
Mhm.
There's got to be something here. What are they? I want that thing, right? What are
Yeah.
they doing? You know, what was that moment like for you where it was like it just started to click? Would you say?
Well, first I was challenged at the detox in a way that I hadn't been challenged before. Like I had a few brief periods of staying in treatment places. I'd been to 3 previously, and one of the intake workers there challenged me in a way that I hadn't been challenged, and said, you're a pretty smart guy, you're pretty educated and well spoken, and you've stopped before, so like you've done it 3 times before, so like how are you going to stay stopped? And that really gave me an opportunity to start critically looking at my life and thinking about that. And I said, I don't know. I don't fucking know. If I knew that, I wouldn't be here right now, and and so that's when he slid a piece of paper across the table towards me, and on the piece of paper it said honesty and open-mindedness, truth, brotherhood, restitution, yeah, and there was a few other words I can't recall at this time, and behind each one of those words was a blank space on like a blank line, and he instructed me to write in that empty space, trust the process, and then to put like a little arrow to the next line at the end, trust the process. So behind each word, like honesty, brotherhood, open-mindedness, was trust the process, and he said, this is a pathway and a plan for you. If you don't know, that has worked for a lot of people, if you're willing to, give it a chance. And so that's how I was introduced to a program of recovery that had worked for a lot of other people. And I had been introduced to before, but I hadn't given it an honest sort of evaluation and applied it in a authentic way. But I'd reached that desperate point in my life where I was willing to try literally anything. If he had said, eat 600 pizzas a day in order to maintain sobriety, I would have given that a chance, right? So I was at that desperate point. So I started attending some of these spaces where recovery was spoken about, and by having an open mind, I started to hear my story in other people, and someone had come from Colombia to share their story, and had never shared that in a public setting before, but said my story. They were speaking my life, like a lot of the experiences that I was going through, and in a way that was so unique that there wasn't anybody else that applied to. And it was like sort of like a God shot, like, aha, okay, there's something going on here that I need to, this isn't a coincidence. And that by having that open-minded, I started to see things that perhaps had been present that I'd missed before because I wasn't really present. But there was an incredible thing happening, and the change was occurring, and it was by having an open mind and going into this space of recovery and connecting with people who reached their hand out in service to me, and sponsorship brought me into meeting other people that had even more length of sobriety, and it was in that space that I started to feel a connectedness and to something greater than myself. And I started to open my mind up to a higher power, which I was very disconnected from that as even really an option of healing. But by having that open-mindedness, I was able to connect to my higher power. I choose to call God, and I asked to be absolved and of this obsession. And in that detox, that happened for me, and I felt light as a feather when I did that. When I took that moment of vulnerability and opened myself up to God to take power in my life. And it's something that I now have a consistent practice of
Yeah.
doing, a daily practice of relinquishing that burden from myself. But in order to maintain that, I have to continue being of service to others and reaching that hand out that was reached out to me. And it's that way I'm able to maintain myself. So when you're saying some of these things as well about how service has affected you,
It's okay.
yeah, I can identify that, and I appreciate that.
It's so beautiful, right? Like that's how this thing works. You know, I always tell people that recovery is like a pyramid scheme without the scheme. You know, if practiced properly, like we're just helping all these people,
Right.
and there's no scheme, there's no axes to grind, there's no dues to be paid. If you want to go and drink and you don't want to follow the suggestions that were given to me, I didn't make these up, right?
Right.
That I'm suggesting to you,
Right.
friend, who's trying to get sober. You can go and do some more controlled drinking, like
That's
it was
it.
said, right? I love that, man. It's, you know, the spiritual life is not a theory.
No.
You know?
Yeah.
I love that you said practice, because it's so, I have to be reminded of that too.
Mhm.
And I too, that's why when I when I started the podcast today and started our conversation,
Mm-hmm.
the reason my spirituality is kind of, I do feel spiritually fit in this moment today
Mhm.
is because I've been consistent with that morning practice
Right.
and that night practice.
Right.
And it's not, you know, sitting in a yoga studio monk mode, right, for 2 hours. It can be, certainly.
Sure.
But I added meditation recently to my protocol,
Mhm.
and it's 10 minutes. I follow an app that I paid for. I love it, dude. Like I absolutely love it. It's added a new, again, I'm going to say the word layer, a new layer to my spirituality, where it's like 10 minutes out of my day, I listen to some guy tell me how to notice the fucking world and my thoughts in it and my consciousness.
Right.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
When I didn't even know, if you started talking about this when I was in addiction, I would have punched you out, right? Like I don't want anything to do with that.
Correct.
The now is the most uncomfortable,
Mhm.
annoying place to be
Right.
when you're not tapped in, and when you're in, it can be still too, you know, it's very hard sometimes to be in the now, but
Yeah.
you know, that's where, in my opinion, that's where spirituality is. It's the only place it is. That's where power greater than myself, that's where God is now. He doesn't exist yesterday. He doesn't exist tomorrow, because those don't exist, right? All we have is now. And so to be able to practice spirituality, service is a part of it, reaching out your hand, especially when it's inconvenient for you, because that's when I find, you know, that's when it pays off the most.
That's
right?
it. Yeah.
And again, it's like I'm going to stay sober as a result of being of service, but I need to not do it for anything other than that, I would say, right? There
Mhm.
needs to be no expected return, right? There needs to be no, in my opinion.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It's a practice, and it needs to be repeated, in my opinion, daily too. So I'm happy you brought that up.
Mhm.
I want to talk about unmanageability a little bit,
Sure.
because that's been coming up. That word's been coming up recently for me.
Mhm.
Can you tell me what unmanageability looked like in your first maybe month or 3 months of sobriety, of recovery? Like what sort of things were coming up as unmanageability in the beginning, and then today? What does unmanageability look like today, and how do you handle it?
Sure. Yeah. I think unmanageability initially, for me, was trying to, balance all of these different things in my life, like work and school and family, because I managed the household. I was primary caregiver often for my family. So that in itself was a lot of responsibility. And so my unmanageability was just feeling overwhelmed, trying to do all of these things and be all for everyone all the time, and not prioritizing myself. I was a people pleaser. And so I actually, a friend recommended a book for me that I read, and I listened to that on repeat for the first 30 days. And it was really instrumental in providing some insight into myself and how I was perceived by others. And it helped me to start connecting to myself and learning what was mine to manage and what wasn't. So the first 30 days was just unmanageability. My life, just managing me was my unmanageability.
Yeah. Well said.
Right?
Yeah.
So the first 30 days was just connecting to myself, spending time away from any other type of distraction and making me my number one priority. And that's something that I hadn't done, I think, maybe ever. Like I was the oldest sibling, so I had younger siblings, and I was always sort of, I felt parentified in a way that I was, responsible for being an example. And so that it felt selfish to prioritize myself.
Yeah.
And now look back at that and think that I could have maybe had some different experiences if I was selfish in a healthy way. I think there's a difference between, the selfishness that I would experience as a form of resentment because I didn't have a connection to myself and I didn't have opportunities to grow in my healing and yeah, that sort of lost my thought there.
At least for the beginning though, right? Like a lot of people might hear that and be like, well, it's selfish. You just talked about service, and you have to do that in my experience too, at least in the beginning. Right. And to be honest, there is still a degree of selfishness in a recovery program where you're putting your recovery program first, right? Not necessarily like I'm going to be first in every single, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, I need to put my recovery first because it was taught to me, anything that I put before my recovery, I will lose that thing.
Right.
And that goes for my life, and I know that because when I was, long-term sobriety, I was practicing that. I knew that. Put my wife before, I'll lose it. If I put my marriage before, I'll lose it. If I put my gym workouts or my fitness program before my recovery, I'll lose it. And it's kind of, it sounds sort of messed up, but without my recovery program, I am not connected to myself. Like you said, I'm not me, and then I can't be me. Essentially, I can't be a husband. I can't be a father if in your case, I need to put that stuff first. So I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of people, or at least myself, sort of struggled with is I got to find out who the fuck I am, first of all. And you said that solitude, I need to spend time with me, away from phone, away from computer, away from people,
right?
At least because you're going to be, it's you and you for the rest of your life, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, I always said this to people. It's like, sure, I can go on that vacation and have a couple of drinks and no one would know, right? Because that's like the common thing that used to come up for a lot of people. And I've struggled with that too. I know at the end of the day, like I have to go to bed at the end of the night, right? And how am I going to, so, I mean, coming clean with my relapse was the hardest thing I ever did. It took me a long time. But it was essential. Like I had to do it because when I kept that secret, the longer I kept that secret, well, what do you do with shame that builds up over time and resentment? Right?
Yeah.
I'm fucking in a crack house. You know what I mean? I'm smoking meth. Like that's where I end up when I can't relieve myself of the shame and the resentment that I have towards myself.
Yeah. And I'm similar in that way. If I'm not able to, be honest with myself about what it is that I'm feeling and experiencing, it'll lead me in a path right back to, the drugs, the alcohol, and all other forms of poor coping, overeating, smoking. However, what I found, you mentioned something and it stood out to me. I have spirituality, recovery, and then family, and in that order. I find that has to be the script for my life in order for me to maintain my sobriety. If I am out of order with those things, I start to feel that, and it happens fairly quickly where I'm not able to detach emotionally from things that shouldn't really bother me, but they do. And it's like, oh yeah, I didn't pray this morning. Yeah, I haven't done, that spiritual practice. And so morning meditations are really the way that I like to start my day before I even, my feet touch the ground. I like to just open my eyes and start to get connected to myself in that way. And so, yeah.
And I guess that leads into the next question too, where it's like, so what are those unmanageabilities today? Right. For me, it's like, you mentioned, I love that. I have a hard time. That kind of covers it all.
Mm-hmm.
You said it really well. I have a hard time detaching emotionally from things that normally shouldn't or don't bother me. Shouldn't is a dangerous word, but don't bother me, i.e. financial insecurity.
Right.
That's my thing, is like, how am I going to pay my mortgage coming up? That's been a thing that's coming up for me. Okay, well, the mortgage isn't due today. Okay. So what can I do in this moment right now to solve that problem? Well, nothing really. Like there's nothing I can do.
Right.
And that's to be said with a lot of things. Right. And it's like, I go through the checklist, and to your point, if I'm not checking that with the universe, God, whatever, your higher power, if I'm not checking that with that, it's rumination central, and then that's unmanageability for me. It's like, fuck, I'm not going to be able to pay. And then it's a story. I'm going to lose my house, and then it's like, I'm going to be homeless, and I'm going to, so it just like spins out. What does unmanageability look like to you?
Unmanageability is if those things that you mentioned are all important parts of life and living, and money, security and housing, food security. Like these are all things that are essential to, the lived experience. But a lot of the ways in which they come into my life are out of my control. Right. So what I have control over is how I respond, like, to the outcomes, and not how I influence the outcome. So unmanageability is if I'm trying to have, my will inserted into something, like, and that's not like perhaps meant for me, or, I found that when I have just God in my life and my spiritual fitness is intact, that's it. That's what I need. And that will allow me to deal with anything else that comes up in life.
Yeah.
And if I don't have that, I don't have anything. That's everything for me. And so those other things are like, how housing situation can change, jobs can change, like financial situations can change. They can improve or they can get worse. I stopped thinking about good and bad and just lessons in life, and detaching from the outcomes, and just being present in the moment, and managing moments is become my life. I really am hesitant around any type of long-term sort of planning, because my life hasn't reflected that. I've had, things that I've wanted to do, and I've had a direction in life that I've wanted to go, and I've been able to do that for the most part in areas of my life. But whenever I start getting fixated on where I will arrive at a certain point in my life and what that will look like, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble, like, because that's not real. And so someone said to me, if you have one foot in the past and one foot in the future, you're shitting on today.
I love that one. Love that one.
So I keep that one. Some of these things that are said are really simple, little, I guess, phrases, metaphors, idioms, but they do have an ability to ground me. And I think being grounded and present is what I need in order to, maintain the life that I'm currently living.
Yeah. And that connection, right?
That's it.
One of my favorite recovery speakers that I listen to on podcasts says perception is everything. Everything is perception. And you just stated that so beautifully. Is the glass half full or half empty? It's really that simple in all situations. Am I looking at it from this angle, and it's like there's other angles to sort of look at said thing with, or am I no, like this is the angle right here. This is the way it is. My biggest problem today, I always say this, my biggest problem today is I'm right. Contempt prior to investigation. Like, no, it's the way it is. It's opposite of open-mindedness, really. That's it. That's the way it is. I'm right. We have to do it this way because I've done it once this way or whatever. I've done it, this is the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
It's really, I'm right. Yeah. But, and I know if I feel myself saying those things like, yeah, but I know, it's like, I'm headed down a dark path. I gotta check that with somebody. Right.
Yes.
How do you know you're on the spiritual beam, and how do you know you're off the spiritual beam? What does that look like?
That's a really good question. So how I know that I'm on the spiritual beam is by consistent practice in connection. And so what that looks like for me is to have a moment in the day, and I actually will do this several times in a day, where I'll just, no matter where I'm at, I could be like in transit, just if I have a time of stillness, I just will sit, close my eyes in complete silence, and just connect to something greater than myself. And I can feel my sort of nervous system regulating and a calmness coming over me. And it's in that now that I'm doing what I'm meant to do. And I don't know what I have coming up in my life, but I know where I've come from, and I know where I don't want to be. And so like, that's my guide, is this is where you've come from. I don't know what it looks like going forward, but that's exciting. Like, I know what my life has looked like for a very long period of time. And so in sobriety, I love that just existing in sobriety and having these first time experiences that's my life. That's life. That's living life. And if I'm not present, that's when to your point, I'm not. What was the question?
Like, when do you know you're off the beam?
That's it.
Yeah.
So when I'm not present, when I'm sort of, in my, if I'm disconnected, from sort of like an autopilot, that's when I'm,
Yeah. The way I like to think about it, and this is my meditation practice has made this clear. As of today, if there's one, prayer and meditation are both good, but this meditation has added like a whole separate element to my life. I can either be a sort of lost in thought, and I think this is what you're getting at is, for me, it's like I'm completely disconnected and off the beam when I'm one area. There's many ways for me to get off like that. It looks like many different things. But when I'm sort of an observer of my thoughts, and I'm like, I'm noticing, well, where's that? Like, that's kind of interesting. I'm doing that thing again, in early recovery, it was, and even still, I don't really have, cravings aren't really a big part of my life today, but it comes out in different ways. For me, it's like, that guy looks like he's having fun, and could be drunk or high or whatever. That was fun, wasn't it? That's kind of, sometimes that'll pop up into my head. And then it's like, am I letting that thought just kind of run wild, and I'm being prisoner to that thought, and now it's the whole train and I'm lost in thought? Or am I sort of observing that and being like, oh, I'm doing that fucking thing again. I'm fantasizing about, or I'm lying to myself, or I'm spinning a story, and then you just kind of laugh, and it goes, all these thoughts, they just sort of drift away. Right. So that's what meditation has added for me, is like this whole other layer of being able to observe consciousness and reality and now. And one of the coolest things about what you're talking about is this moment right now has never existed before.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool, to your point. Right. And then now this moment has never existed before.
Right.
This is a new moment.
Yeah.
And we don't know what's going to happen next. You know, it's cool when you think about it that way.
Yeah.
So you mentioned like a little bit about your essentials in recovery. Has it changed since you came in terms of daily practices and what you do now?
So like absolutely.
Your routine, right?
Yeah, definitely it's changed. Like for the first, say, 6 months of my recovery, I like that just recovery alone was my job. Like that was full-time job.
Yeah.
You know, I stepped away from work and even from, family, and that was scary because like to just sort of leave this privilege in your life of security, I didn't have a lot over me in terms of that responsibility financially. But it was it was a tough decision. It was scary to do. It took time to work up to that place of courage where I could step out into the unknown. And when I did, things started working that I couldn't explain. Like doors would open that were closed, and things happened at such a rapid pace in my life that I thought would take a long time to happen. Like, and it was by just not having anything other than building a strong foundation in recovery. And I'm thankful that I did that, that 6 months was dedicated to that in my life. It's something that it's not, a lot of people don't get that opportunity.
Yeah.
And or see life that way, that's essential. I didn't. But I started to just become comfortable in recovery and in healing and in personal growth and seeking those things out, and just learning myself, learning me, how I'm seen in the world, and being open to feedback, having that vulnerability, because that allowed me to become my biggest champion and cheerleader, and to back me and realize that I got me for the first time, feeling that like I can hold space for me and not lose myself in supporting others. Something that has happened for me in the past is, my by showing up for others, and neglecting myself, it's really taken from me, and there wasn't much left for others. And I reached a place where I was pouring from an empty cup, just completely depleted. So, by that, taking that time to pour into myself, and heal, it provided a runway for me, where I was able to get some momentum in my recovery and start to see some positive things happening. It was like a ripple, just little by little, step by step, seed by seed, planting and watering and having that patience and trusting in the process.
Yeah. And to your point earlier, you mentioned the gratification thing. It's like, if you can do that long enough, and it's different for everybody, right? People, how long does that take to start, seeing the rewards of your recovery or the promises or whatever? If you can stay around long enough where you start to get a few of those things back, the momentum builds, and then it's just trust the process. I love, writing that down next to everything. If I am all of these things and then I trust the process, it'll work out. Not in my time and not the way I want it to, but I'm going to get everything I need.
That's it.
Honesty, humility, and then well, this doesn't feel good right now. This, like, I've been honest for 3 days in a row now, and I've lost my job, or you know what I mean? But it's like, dude, just trust something else is coming.
That's it.
Trust the process, right? When one window closes, another door opens, or whatever that phrase is, or that saying. I love it though. I know that community is a big part in your recovery today, and connection with fellowship of other people. This one comes up a lot. Boredom in recovery, right? How do you deal with fun? Like, how do you have fun? I think since I've been on social media and being out loud, recovering out loud, not to plug the own podcast, but it's true. Like, since I've been talking about this and getting feedback from others, that seems to be number one every single time. I relapse because I'm bored. I was taught by my therapist that boredom is fear, and fear is, this is my life now, right? So how do you have fun in recovery? How did you combat that boredom in community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that was probably one of the things that held me back from sobriety for a long time, was like, it looked, from my perspective, that was boring, because for me, that excitement and dopamine came from using substances. So I developed a new baseline of finding joy in simple things.
Yeah.
So what would bring pleasure in the past may have been really extreme, and now it became, by being present, something simple like the wings of a butterfly, a blue sky, a bee on roses. I started to take and notice really simple things that were small and present, like I bought a succulent, and like it fell off, and it was just this perfect bud of a plant, and it like just looked beautiful. And I would have discarded that moment in the past of noticing. So what became fun was having presence, like noticing moments in life and taking joy in seeing other people's joy.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah. I started to explore different hobbies. I started to, try things that had gone as, something I'd like to do one day. Those one days stopped being one day and started being today. Right. I started, getting into art, exploring art, and journaling, writing out what was important, what were goals, what were just like documenting my life. That journaling was also a routine and a ritual that really helped to provide some consistency. And it was a reference point as well. So I could look back and be like, oh yeah, this has happened at this point. And this is what, this was the win from then. Or this is what you need to follow up on, that was a goal that still has gone unmet. And because everything was on my head before. And so now to get some of my head out of my head and into, my words and my voice to come, my pen to write, my thoughts to expand and explore, my creativity, like fun became being present in my life. That became fun. And doing things with other people that, like, in sobriety, like having a beach party, that was something that I thought would be difficult, like once the warm weather comes, like, how am I going to have
Patios,
fun? Summertime, but there was gatherings I went to that in sobriety with people that were in recovery, and we had a blast. I had so much more fun than I ever did in the past. Like, that was actually fun.
Yeah.
And it didn't come with any type of shame or regret or
hangover
or just forgetting details. So being able to document my own life and showing up in my life was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, you said exactly what I always try to preach, and it's not sexy, right? It doesn't sound sexy, but it's so true. Is your idea of fun will change.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. You know, when you come in, it just your baseline. You said it so nice. Your baseline changes. Your idea of fun, and yeah, I mean, living in Toronto can be stressful at times with the amount of people and congestion and lack of space.
Yeah.
But in the summer, there's so much to do. And my wife was a big a proponent of showing me that, right? Going to the islands, going to the beaches. There's lots of beaches. It's like, I didn't know any of this stuff existed because I was stuck on the patio drinking. And that was my idea of fun.
Right.
Was being boxed in by four walls.
Right.
You know, I didn't do anything worth talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
I do.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Like even in the winter too, we go snowboarding now. It's like, I didn't even want to get out of bed to do that before. Right. So it's beautiful. I mean, we are not a glum lot. And find your people, find your community. You can't do this thing alone. You gotta do it with other. That's the other thing too. When you see other people sober having fun, it really adds a level of comfort too.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, that's true. Because I would see that on people's faces that had, 13 years of sobriety. They're just glowing, and there's just this peace and joy and contentment and presence, and you can see their life. That's the best example. That's the best sort of verification that this works, is the lived experiences of people doing it and the example that they set out. So it was seeing other people and how their lives have benefited and the life that they're living, the growth that they've gone through. That's what helped to encourage me to be consistent in it. And because there's days where your life isn't looking like that.
Yeah.
Right. But just knowing that it's the possibility that it could, but I know that it won't look like that if I do some other things in my life, if I make poor decisions, if I'm like disconnecting and detaching from my reality and escaping. Yeah. And just because it was just existing. I wasn't really living. I was just existing, and I was maybe present physically, but I was really in a different space in my head.
Yeah. And to your point, either in the past or the future. For me, it was like today I'd say I live a lot too much in the future, but in active addiction, there's a lot of living in the past too, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of future, but there's also a lot of, why did I do that? I'm going to just use and make this all go away. Man, so well said. Let's end with this. I got a lot out of today. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming down. But if you could say something to your early recovery self, what do you think you would say?
You're doing great. It will keep getting better. Be consistent and be kind to yourself. Be really kind and have grace for yourself, because you've come through a lot and you've done an amazing, and you've survived. You're still here, and it will be better.
Love it. Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you too. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. Please help us grow the channel and like, share, and subscribe for more content. The discussions and stories shared on this podcast are for informational and motivational purposes only. This content is not a substitute for professional medical advice, addiction treatment, or therapy. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please consult a licensed physician, addiction specialist, or mental health professional. You are no longer alone.